Hey guys, it's Shelby, and today we're going to talk about some more ways that living sustainably is not necessarily aesthetically pleasing. The last video I made like this you guys seem to really like, and I'm really happy about that because honestly, living a sustainable lifestyle in many ways can be aesthetic, but it doesn't have to be all about aesthetics. And also, there are a lot of ways that living sustainably is just not cute at all. It can be dirty, it can be gross, it's not glamorous, but it is good for the planet, which is why we're all here, right? So I rounded up a few more ways that living more sustainably is not necessarily the more aesthetically pleasing way to live, and we're going to talk about those, but I want to hear from you in the comments. What are some more ways that living sustainably is not necessarily aesthetically pleasing? And we can make this sort of a series on this channel if you want. And if nothing else, I'm always excited to see more ways that people are living sustainably, whether it be an aesthetically pleasing way, whether it be a more affordable way, or even if you are being more aesthetically pleasing. We want to hear all of it, so let me know in the comments. Just one more really quick thing before we jump into it. I do want to give a huge thank you to Native for partnering with me on this video, because in the last episode of this little mini series, I talked about how my deodorant was not aesthetically pleasing because for years, Native has been the only deodorant I use that actually worked for me, and it was packaged in plastic. Deodorant packaged in plastic is not necessarily the most aesthetic thing, especially for zero waste Instagram. So I included Native in the last video to talk about how my deodorant is not the most aesthetic, but it's the only thing that worked for me for so long. So it was one of the only things I constantly repurchased that came in plastic. But I am so excited to be partnering with Native on this video today because they are now making a plastic-free version of this amazing deodorant. So we don't need this non-aesthetically pleasing plastic packaging anymore. Just kidding, use up what you already have first, of course, and then reuse or recycle or both the packaging. But yes, Native now comes in cardboard packaging, plastic-free packaging, all the same great scents. It's still vegan, it's still cruelty-free, still aluminum-free, still made in San Francisco. I mean, what more could you want out of a deodorant? I don't know, I have no better things to say about Native than I've tried dozens of deodorants over the years, and this is the only one that has consistently worked for me. So if you want to pick up some Native deodorant in the plastic-free packaging for yourself, there's a link at the top of the description, and you can get 25% off with code Shelby5, because this right here, this is aesthetically pleasing. And I know in this particular series we're talking about things that are not aesthetically pleasing, but what's wrong if something is good for the planet and aesthetically pleasing? So my favorite scent is this charcoal scent. Check it out, and let's get into the other things we're going to talk about today. Now I've talked about how I hang dry my clothes before, how much I love my laundry rack. But you should also know that this is not the most aesthetically pleasing thing, right? If I just took my clothes out of the washer, put them in the dryer, they would be out of sight, out of mind. They wouldn't be hanging here for however long it takes them to hang dry. It's not the cutest thing. And we actually recently had new lighting put in the kitchen, and the guys were in here working, and my underwear, my Thinx underwear, were hanging on the side just like they are now. And I remember thinking, that's not cute, Shelby. It's definitely a lot cuter to just not have this hanging here, but it's cheaper, it saves you money, and it's better for the planet. And I've also had so many of you ask me why we don't hang dry our clothes outside, and the answer is because I would have to hang a line somewhere in the backyard, which I don't really want to do. Number two, it's very hot here, and I also have very sensitive skin to the sun. I just don't go outside literally until probably October. I will not go outside in the sun until after 7 p.m. And also you run the risk of the birds that my sister feeds in the backyard pooping on our clothes. I don't want any part of that. And this is just really convenient for me. I have no problem with the fact that it's not cute because it's really functional for me personally. So I love this, but definitely not the cutest thing when we're talking about sustainable living. Next up is a really broad topic, but it's not always the most aesthetically pleasing thing to do, and that is simply reusing. Reusing what you already have, reusing things that come into your home. But I have a good example right here of something I reuse that's definitely not the cutest. So this is a pickle jar that I upcycled to be my reusable cloth, like rags thing situation, napkins, whatever you want to use them for. I basically reuse this jar to store my not paper towels, my alternative to paper towels. What am I saying? But yeah, I reuse this jar to store all of these in. So basically when someone needs one, they just take it, use it, put it in the washer, put it back in here, stuff them in here. It's a nice big pickle jar, so they stuff in there really nicely. And of course, this is definitely not as cute as this. This is one of those swing top jars, and all of those swing top jars I have, I was able to find at thrift stores, and I'm always on the lookout for them because I feel like you can use them for so many different things. This one I'm using right now to store the laundry detergent I'm currently using. More details on that to come. But my point here with this tip is that living sustainably has to do with reusing what you already have or purchasing things largely secondhand, so we're not contributing to the creation of new things. And by reusing this pickle jar for these cloths, I was able to stop something from A, maybe going to a landfill, B, even having to be recycled, because recycling is a last resort. Always remember that. Recycling things takes energy and does have its own footprint, and while recycling glass can be done indefinitely, our recycling system is not perfect, so it's better to reuse what you have than to just recycle it. So definitely a huge part of living a more sustainable lifestyle would be to reuse stuff, even if that stuff isn't always the cutest option. Next up, we have your yard or your garden or whatever word you use for that. I can't speak for everywhere in the world. I don't know what it's like in other countries or maybe even other states, but at least here where I live and how I grew up and how media presents it, having the most beautiful, fresh cut green grass lawn is definitely the aesthetic that most people strive for when you think of the American dream. It's definitely a white picket fence and a perfectly green lawn. And while that may be the traditional aesthetically pleasing thing, it's definitely not the best thing for the planet. Those perfectly green grass lawns create monocultures and really cut down on the ability of biodiversity within the lawn. Well, they went a butterfly. The way our ecosystems naturally work is there's a bunch of different varieties of plants, the different bugs depend on, the different predators eat those bugs, and on and up the food chain kind of all starts, well, really with the soil, but also with what's growing in that soil, aka the grass. And while I know that not all of us even have a yard and not all of us have the ability to change our yards, it's definitely something to think about, that having native flowers, native grasses, so it's definitely a way that is better for the planet to diversify what is in your yard, to have different plants, to have native plants, but it's definitely going to look a little unruly. It's not going to look like your perfectly manicured lawn. That is definitely a way that living with a different aesthetic, maybe some people think it is aesthetically pleasing to have a bunch of different stuff in your yard. Let me know what you think down below, if you think yards that are more diverse are cuter, because I personally like the more natural aesthetic better, or if you think perfectly green grass lawns are better. But I think we know what the status quo is. Last but most certainly not least is my Imperfect Foods box subscription. So I've been talking about Imperfect Foods for a really long time, but in case you don't know what they are, basically they're a service that helps save food from landfills, because 40% of all the food grown in the US actually goes to the landfill before it even makes it to the supermarket. So that's not even really incorporating all the food waste that comes along with like things that go bad in our homes. This is just before it makes it, because it doesn't look good. And that's where Imperfect Foods kind of came in and was able to take a lot of those foods, stop them from going to the landfill, and sell them direct to consumer. I believe it's called a D2C company. Look at me go. So the whole idea behind this subscription box is basically that the stuff you receive is not very aesthetically pleasing. But I will tell you that over the years of using Imperfect Foods, I definitely have never received anything that was too ugly. But that's the entire idea behind this model, is that in society right now, food that is not perfect is deemed as not as good and ends up getting thrown out. So this is like the perfect idea behind living a more sustainable lifestyle, but also it's not as aesthetically pleasing. And you don't have to get Imperfect Foods to start supporting uglier foods, because for instance, like in grocery stores, things that do end up on the shelves are either misshapen, maybe bruised, maybe in quantities that aren't as desirable, such as single bananas. you can choose those things and help prevent those things from going to the landfill after they don't sell because they're being picked over by other customers. Anyone can bring a reusable bag to the grocery store, which is obviously a really great thing to do, but beyond that, what more can we do? And I think the answer is choosing less than perfect foods whenever we are choosing at the grocery store. Or if you want to pick up an Imperfect Foods box, I'll leave my $10 off link in the description. It'll just give you $10 to get groceries, and it gives me $10 to get groceries. It's not sponsored, it's not even affiliated, anyone can get one of those links. But yeah, in the spirit of being less aesthetically pleasing, I thought I would mention my Imperfect Foods box because I love it so much. If you are interested in an aesthetically pleasing, plastic-free, natural, vegan, cruelty-free, aluminum-free deodorant, make sure you guys check out Native. You guys, I've been talking about them for so long, and I'm just being honest, it's the only deodorant that has honestly worked for me and for my partner. It took me a long time to get her off of aluminum deodorants, and so I'm always stoked to recommend it to you guys, and I know a lot of you use it and love it, so definitely check them out. 25% off with code Shelbi5. And remember, until next time, you cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you can do. Bye, guys.